So my name's Noah Asher, and I'm the author of Chaos: Overcoming the Overwhelming. And the book really started and formulated years ago when I was going through my most chaotic journey, and it was with addiction and then incarceration, and there's just really struggling in that period. And I ended up trying to take my life while locked up because I just thought purpose was over, life was over, thought there was nothing else to live for. And when I just remember, it's like I knew the hymns, but I did not know him, and there's a big difference there. And
Mhm.
so leaning in to rely on God in that moment, like many people do in that situation, was just the first step. And I told him, hey, God, like if you love me like you say you do, please take my life because I'm in so much pain. And when he didn't do it, I was so frustrated that I ended up trying to take my life myself. And obviously that didn't work. Spoiler alert, didn't
Mhm.
work because here I sit. But it was a not so fun journey. But I remember sitting in my cell going, okay, I can't change where I am physically, but I can change where I am mentally and where I am spiritually. And so I leaned into that. I read a bunch because what else do you do when you're locked up but read and write? And so I read a bunch, I wrote a bunch, and I wrote a bunch of letters to my mom and my dad. Really, it's kind of therapy to tell myself, hey, I'm going to get through this. We're going to get through this. And fast forward, I get out. My mom hands me this vintage suitcase, and inside were all the letters I ever wrote her. And I started sifting through those letters going, there's some good stuff here and it needs to be shared with the world. And so that's when I started really diving in and writing Chaos.
Wow. Wow. Okay, you say you struggle some with addiction, and what led to that? What was the feelings? I mean, was you just doing recreational, and how did you lead to your downfall?
Yeah, good question. It all started 20 years ago. I know that's hard to believe because I look 20. Just kidding. But when I was 20 years ago, I was 13. I was in middle school. And I actually had a leader at the church, unfortunately, take advantage of me. And it really
Mm.
started a spiraling uh, path of just shame, as well as hurt, as well as anger. And but that shame led me to wanting to mask the pain and bandage up the pain instead of dealing with the pain. And because of that, it led to alcohol. And then eventually the alcohol wasn't doing it justice for me. And so led to pills. And that was just kind of the spiraling down of my downfall. And so happened when I was 13, and then I everything else happened when I was 20, and now I'm 33. And so I'm on the other side of this. And what's really cool is in my book I talk about how storms and battles always come in our life.
Right.
And because of storms, because of battles, we can prepare. And so the first section of the book is all about preparing our hearts and our minds. And we look at chapters in the book. There's one in the first section where it's all about friendship and how important having those friends in your life are before the battle ever comes your way. And then the second section of the book is in the midst. And it's all about, okay, once the storm hits, once the enemy arrives, how do we attack? How do we fight back? How do we continue on in purpose instead of just in our pain? And then the third
Mm.
section is all about the aftermath. And it's once the storm dissipates, once the enemy retreats, a lot of times we're left to rebuild. And in that rebuilding phase, that is where I feel like my life is now. I'm on the other side of the storm, I'm on the other
Okay.
side of the battle. And while that chaos left a lot of rubble and a lot of stuff to sift through, it has
Hmm.
allowed me to understand, though, that I'm in the rebuilding phase of life.
Okay, that's great. You mentioned some of that when the attack comes. Can you give listeners and some examples you
Oh,
might
yeah.
use during that time?
Yeah. So the word chaos, the reason I even titled the book Chaos was because I didn't want it to sound like some prison book or some addiction book alone. I wanted to show that chaos comes in many different forms. So if you're listening to this going, okay, when I hear the word chaos, I think of addiction. Well, this is for you. And if you're listening to it, I just went through a divorce. Well, this is for you. Through illness, is for you. I wrote this with the mindset of someone sitting on their prison cell bed reading, but also someone sitting in the chair getting chemo, and someone that just got home from burying their loved one at the funeral home and at the cemetery. I guess that's where you bury is at the cemetery, not the funeral home. But
Hmm.
you, but coming back from that and reading something like this, and because I think the enemy can attack in so many different ways, and the reality is, Scripture describes the enemy as the devil who prowls around like a lion, and it's so important to understand why he's trying to be like a lion, and it's because Jesus is the Lion of Judah, and
Okay.
so he's trying to I put it this way in the book is that he's just a guy in a lion's costume. That's all he is. He's just wearing a costume. But you
Okay.
wear the costume because you know that that's who you want to be. And that was
Mm-hmm.
the downfall of Satan in the Bible anyway, right? Is because
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to be the person in charge. And
Yeah.
that was his downfall. And so now he still is prowling around like a lion. And because of that, he's sneaky. You know, he's working to tear you down. In fact, for me, a lot of what I see is that I thought purpose was over. But then Romans 11 describes our calling, our purpose is irrevocable. And because
Mm.
of that, it's so important to understand that the enemy knows, we should know that, but the enemy unfortunately knows that as well. And so the enemy goes, okay, if I can't touch that person's calling, I'm going to go after their character
Okay.
every time. And so that's how the enemy likes to attack a lot of times is through our character and through community, people in our communities, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the tools that you use? You okay? We on guard now. We see the attack through our character. What are type of the tools that you have used, or you know someone who have used who help counter those attacks?
Oh, yeah, good question. I would say first and foremost, the most important thing to do is have allies before the battle comes. Have people that are willing to fight for you. Best example I can give is in Mark chapter 2, you see this guy who's paralyzed, and he has four friends who carry him to Jesus. And when they get there, there's so many people in the place
Hmm.
that they lower their friend, they carry him up to the roof, and they lower their friend to Jesus. And Jesus doesn't look at the paralyzed man. He actually looks
Right.
up at the four friends and he says, by your faith, your friend is healed. And what we need to understand is so many times chaos will leave us paralyzed from pain
Hmm.
that we are just too unable to move. And we need people in our corner who is willing to lift us and then lower us to Jesus, whether it's through prayer,
Yeah.
whether it's through encouragement. So that's the biggest thing that I've seen in my life that has helped is family and friends. And I've talked to so many people who ask that question, a similar question. And
Hmm.
what they do is when they hear, oh, I had good family, they're going, oh, well, you have that, I don't have that. And they kind of take a step back. And it's like, no, if you don't have that sort of family, blood family support, that's
Hmm.
okay. Go make family.
Okay.
Like I have friends that are my brothers, you know, that I ride or die, you know.
Yeah.
um, it's and that's how you want it to be.
Right, right. So you say get connected, so to speak. Because
Yeah.
I'm big in the recovery community, and that's part of my family. So I totally understand that. What about when people go through chaos who struggle with reaching out to other people, who struggle, I mean, are loners, and they like to
Yeah.
isolate. That's a chaos by itself. What
Right.
about those listeners?
Yeah, that is unfortunate, but there's so much studies that prove that in being an introvert is real. And so obviously it's not
Hmm.
something to just say. I hate when someone says something like, "Oh, just suck it up." Like, no, 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 no. They're if they're introverted by nature, if that's how God created them to be, they're still a masterpiece, and they got to understand that that's who you are. And so it's not always right to be around in a large group. But a lot of introverts can still have that one friend that they pour into, and so that's important. And ultimately, to the end of the day, the bottom line is we have the best friend we could ever have, and his name is Jesus. And when we lean on him and we hold on to him, it allows us to to share intimate relationship with him. And what I love about being close with him is that He already knows my deep, dark secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he still loves me. He
Yeah.
still leaves the 99 for the one. So if you feel like I'm not the person to be with the 99, you're still in good company because Jesus leaves the 99 a lot of times for the one.
So your faith, I'm hearing you right. Noah, your faith play a big role in this overcoming the
Yes,
overwhelming, right?
for sure.
What about the listeners? Okay, that's really not big on religion and Jesus. What about those people who struggle with Jesus and things like that? How do they? You gain tools to help them through their
Yeah.
chaos?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the practices are really still the same when it comes to uh, leaning on, creating a support team, whether it's 10 or whether it's one. You can
Hmm.
still have that sort of support team. You can also still, a lot of times I've talked to people who are like, I don't want to go to church, and I go, okay, well, you can still plug in with a small group through Celebrate Recovery or AA, NA. You can still
Hmm.
get involved in other ways and other outlets. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be just the church that they go to. And I don't always, if they tell me they are just adamant about not going to church, I'm not going to judge them for that, but I'm also not going to try to send them to that and pressure them in any way. So yeah, send them to AA, send them to NA, send them to somewhere that they can get help in a different perspective.
great. What about those with church hurt? Yeah, I know you done heard that several
Yes.
times. Um,
Yeah.
did you have an experience with church hurt? I know. Did you when you went through your situation? Did you blame the church?
Yeah, I had a little bit of church hurt. For me, I get asked a lot of times, and people come to me because of my story and will tell me they're sort of church hurt. And I go, well, the way I look at it is it's just people are people. They're not who I follow. I don't follow them as a believer. I follow Jesus. And so they make mistakes, they do things wrong. And while it does make me shake my head sometimes and get
Right.
frustrated, bottom line is that's not who I follow.